Hi. Alright, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook, and today I have to film a type of video that I don't really love to film because I love to come on here, I love to be positive, I love to ramble and rave about the books that I love with you guys, and I have done that so many times talking about the series that we're going to be talking about today, the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. You guys know, if you've been watching me for a while, one of my all-time favorites. I absolutely flew through the first 4 books in that series. I have expressed how deeply I love them this entire year. I've been so excited for the release of Taming 7, which is the 5th book in the series, and I waited and waited. I bought it the day it came out. I immediately started it, and yeah, you guys might be able to tell because it is now June as I'm doing this review. This book came out April 17th, and the thing is, it took me that long to read it, and you might be able to tell it's not that long of a book, especially compared to the other books within this series, and yet it still took me about 6 weeks to read it. So if that tells you anything, you might be able to guess how I felt about this book. And it's really sad because I avoided spoilers as much as I could, reviews, everything. Whenever I haven't finished a book, I don't seek out other opinions. I want to form them on my own. And after finishing and kind of looking into it, it seems that very few people, especially the ones that are really diehard fans of this series, were really happy with this book. And you know, I know why. I know why reading it. This is obviously Claire and Gibbs's story. By the way, I'm saying full spoilers if that's not obvious. So if you haven't read this book yet, if you're planning to read it, don't watch this video or come back and watch it once you've read it, because I have to just candidly talk about what happened because I want to. Frankly, I need to talk about it. So yeah, this is Claire and Gibbs's highly anticipated story. All throughout Finding 13, Keeping 13, Saving 6, Redeeming 6, we see Gibbsy. He's a big character. He is the funny guy, the golden retriever. He's that side character that everybody loves. Like, I loved Gibbsy from the beginning. He was the perfect like comic relief, and he's also just like the perfect example of like a great best friend to have. Loved him. And then Claire, you know, we see she is Shannon's friend, but you don't see as much of her as you do Gibbsy, but still, you know, like there's something between them. They've been friends since they were kids. Everyone, you know, knows that they like each other. They know they like each other, but they're just not together yet. Nobody knows why. So this has been the very highly anticipated release of their story, and I was excited for it. Friends to lovers can be a kind of hit or miss trope for me, I find, but usually like when it's a childhood friends to lovers, that's gonna hit for me. And there was so much that I was expecting out of this book. I really thought that we were gonna get a lot of flashbacks. I thought we were gonna maybe go back earlier into the series and see, you know, scenes that we had already seen, but maybe now from their point of view, and that's just not really what we got in this story. And honestly, the more that I sit here and try to think about it, it's been about a week since I finished it, and I'm still asking myself, what was the plot of this book? And when I say that, I am a lover of a character-driven story. That is not an issue for me. There are so many books that are my favorite books where I feel like you can't even tell what exactly the plot is, but you know there's something going, there's something keeping you interested. There's a point A to a point B, and you get there somehow. And you know, the other books in this series as well, they're very character driven, and you could argue that there's not much of a plot to them either, but for some reason in those books it worked for me, and in this book it just didn't. And it makes me really sad. I will say, you know, I loved Gibbsy, I always loved him, but I was curious how it was going to be really being inside of his head and making him the main character, because it's always like a slippery slope whenever you have like the funny side character everyone loves. When you make them the main character, it's like, is it going to be too much? Like, too much of a good thing? Sometimes that doesn't work out. So I kind of experienced a little bit of that, but Claire was just a whole nother subject for me. I hate hating on female characters because it's just like, you know, we want to be girls, we want to relate to our female characters, but when I say that Claire, I'm trying to think, if there's another female character that I have read that I disliked more than I disliked Claire in this story. I don't even know where to begin. First of all, this story in general, you guys might agree, please back me up if you feel this way. This story just felt different to me compared to the other books. In so many ways, I'm like, was this written by a different author? Like, the whole tone of it just felt so different. And a big part of that for me was that Claire and Gibbsy together, honestly, it felt like such a like immature story. Like, they're supposed to be in high school, obviously, but everybody in this series is in high school. And you know, it's technically, now that it's been picked up by a traditional publisher, which I will get more into, it's being marketed as a young adult series, which from the beginning, I have been appalled by that, because if you've read the first 4 books in this series, you know there are so many adult themes in this. I don't care if it's set in high school. It's a very adult story for so many reasons. I mean, the language alone, but then so many, you know, sexual encounters, so much violence, so much trauma. It's very deep, it's very dark. In my opinion, this is not a young adult series, but this is the first book in the series that was, you know, written under a publisher. And I think it really, really shows, and it really had this just young adult sort of vibe to it. And Claire, even though she's a high schooler, you could have told me that she was 12 years old. The way that she talked, the way that she acted, God, she could have been younger than that with the way that she acted at times. It's like she had the mind of a child, and it just got to be so tiring for me, like hearing all of her times that she was like, you're super rude, you're super annoying, oh, crackers, oh, she was so impulsive, and it's like she had no social awareness, no ability to like take a breath and think about boundaries, think about, you know, the social situation that she's in. Everything she did was just so childish. And that combined with Gibbsy, who's like funny boy, golden retriever, it was a lot for me to handle. Like, it was a lot just reading the book. It really was difficult for me to be invested in their relationship. Like, every time it was Gibbsy's chapter, I was like, thank God. And then when we got back to Claire, I was just like, oh my God. It just kind of killed me being inside of her head. And you know, it's interesting. You go into this story and it's like, you know, Claire and Gibbsy have been friends forever. They've been very close. You do get a deeper look at Gibbsy. You do understand that, you know, he is the funny guy. He is the nice guy, but he has some trauma in his life. Like, literally every character in this series does. You know, whenever he was a kid, his dad and his sister drowned, and he was saved, and that's really stuck with him for his entire life. And there ends up being kind of more to that story, and you know, his mom ends up remarrying, getting a new husband. He then gets an older stepbrother that we, you know, meet and learn more about in the story. So there is some depth to Gibbsy, and I will circle back to that. But a really main issue for me in this story was that there was just no depth whatsoever to Claire. Like, Claire had, you know, Gibbsy has Johnny, and you know, they have everything that they're doing going on, and he also plays rugby, and he has, you know, this family drama, and there's just more going on with him. He also has this relationship that we know about with like Aoife and Joey, where he's involved in their story. But Claire, it's like there was absolutely nothing going on in her life aside from Gibbsy. Like, her entire world revolved around him, and every aspect of her story was just wanting to be his girlfriend from the very beginning. I mean, you just jump into the story and you know that because Gibbsy has this sort of traumatic past, and because Claire has always been his best friend, they've always, you know, he has nightmares and he goes over to her place. They have sleepovers a lot of the time. They sleep in the same bed. Nothing has ever really happened between them. They've never crossed that line, but they're very close and they both love each other, but they just haven't, you know, bit the bullet. They haven't decided to be together. And so the story just kind of picks up in this random sort of place of like where Redeeming 6 left off, and Claire really likes him and Gibbsy likes her, and she just is getting tired of, I guess, waiting on him, and she wants more from him. And there's just, it just felt like such a repetitive story. It's like the whole thing was just, you know, interactions between them, and then Claire getting frustrated with him, and then her like wanting him to do more and give her more and show her that he cares, and which is valid, right? Like, I can understand her frustration, but it just felt like they had the same conversation over and over. And then you get Gibbs's internal mind where he's like, I love her, but I'm afraid to have her and I don't deserve her. And you're wondering what's going on there. And then you have the whole Lizzie side of it all, which is a whole nother subject. Lizzie is such a complex, interesting, insufferable character, but I want to know more about her, and there's obviously a lot more to her, so I am interested once we get to her book. But this entire book, Lizzie's just an absolute menace. Like, we know from the previous books that she is not a fan of Gibbsy, but we really learn why in this story. You know that her sister committed suicide and she was dating Gibbsy's older stepbrother, and you know, there have been reports that, you know, the older stepbrother assaulted Lizzie's sister, and it's kind of been led for everyone to believe that Lizzie's sister, you know, ended her life for a lot of reasons, but that was a big one. And so Lizzie really like blames Gibbsy for that for some reason, which I know grief is like a wild thing and everybody grieves differently, and I can't even imagine losing a sister, so her anger at him is just, you can't really judge her for that, but at the same time, it just felt so tiring of like, he didn't do anything. Gibbsy didn't do anything. And so you're just like insistence on hating him and insistence on Claire not being with him because of what happened to your sister. It made sense to some extent, but it just went on and on and on and on. It was just so repetitive of her and Claire fighting, and then her and Gibbsy fighting, and her and Claire having it out, and Claire having to choose sides, and it was just so frustrating to repeatedly read that. And then, you know, later on come to find out that Lizzie didn't really know the truth about what happened, and all along it turned out instead of Gibbsy's stepbrother assaulting his girlfriend at the time, Lizzie's sister, he was actually assaulting Gibbsy, which was a crazy reveal, a very graphic reveal. And I am just gonna say this, trauma, like I said, is a big part of this series. The first two books, there's so much happening in the Lynch household. It's very dark, but something about this book just felt different to me. And I don't know if you guys agree, but it just felt a little forced. Like, obviously this is something that happens, which is heartbreaking and horrible, but it almost felt like, you know, Claire is over here with no other story, nothing to her, nothing in her past, no sort of depth to her. And so it felt like, okay, how can we make Gibbsy the funny boy? How can we give him some depth? Like, how can we add a little bit more to his character and, you know, give a reason for why he won't be with Claire even though he's clearly in love with her, tells her he loves her all the time. Like, I need a reason for them to not be together. And to me, it just felt like a little bit forced and a little bit, I don't know, it's like every plot is made up, right? Everything is forced, everything is fabricated in a story, but just, it's like the way it feels. The way it feels to me is just that, I don't know, it just didn't land, is all I can say. And that being said, the beginning of the story, like I said, I was so excited going into it. The first 50 pages or so, I was pretty invested. Like, we got that first initial flashback of Claire and Gibbsy when they were young. I was like, oh my gosh, this is cute. Like, I hope we get more of this. And then we kind of see them and we see the tension between them, and, you know, things start to kind of happen, and you see all the other characters. Like, Johnny is really present in this. You see Joey, and, you know, I was excited, but then it just got so, like, it just went so downhill for me so fast. The middle was so slow. So slow. I felt like the entire middle of this book I was just dragging my feet. Like, it took me so long to get through this middle chunk, and then the end was like the speed of light. Just the way everything wrapped up at the end, and it was like Claire made the outburst when she found out that what happened to Gibbsy. She makes the outburst again, just so impulsively, so childish. Like, literally, what is wrong with you? I wanted to jump into the book and slap her across the face because I was so angry. But that's just how she is, and she makes that proclamation in front of everyone of what happens to Gibbsy, literally tells the worst thing that's ever happened to him for him, releases that secret, and then he just kind of forgives her, and now they're together, and end of story. That's what it felt like. It felt so fast and so crazy, and then it just kind of ended. And I don't know, I could just tell overall, I've heard through the grapevine that you know, Chloe Walsh was kind of forced to remove like 50,000 words of the story, that she had to really cut it down because it's so much shorter than her other books. And it shows. It definitely shows. And as much as I'm like, oh, it was slow in the middle, so you would think like, why do you want more words? Why do you want more content to it? I think it would have helped. I think maybe like the parts that were slow and the parts that seemed to not make sense maybe would have connected better, or I would have gotten more of a chance to feel attached to the characters. I think maybe there was more to Claire that we didn't get to see that got cut because it, you know, wasn't relevant necessarily to the plot that didn't really exist. But I don't know. I don't know, guys. That is my not so review of this book. I didn't like it. I was very disappointed. I'm very nervous going forward for the series. It just kills me whenever a series I love gets picked up by a publisher and then it just seems to go downhill. But I will be reading the next book for sure, so don't you worry. I'll be here to hopefully rave and not rant about it. But yeah, what did you guys think of Taming 7? I would love to hear. Thank you so much for watching. I just did this in one take, no edits. Look at me. Really on my game today. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully the next video is a little more positive. I love you guys so much.